Sometimes it's less mysterious than other times. But let's get into it. Mark's Murder Mystery Monday, and we'll welcome our guest.
To Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
Oh. Put it together for Courtney, everybody, who's our regular visitor. Nice to have you, Courtney, always.
Well, thank you for having me.
And this is quite a special installment.
It is.
Because
we have
from
a professional here.
A professional mystery murder storyteller.
Exactly.
An investigator who is on the most popular murder mystery program and offering, I would say, in America.
Yes.
Not only the television, but the podcast is number one.
Yeah, all of their podcasts. They have multiple podcasts.
Oh, do they? That's great. Well, there's only one of him. He's the great Josh Mankiewicz, everybody. Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Josh Mankiewicz. I have no idea what you guys are discussing today, but we are excited to talk to you and glad that you're here. And Josh, we love your work on Dateline, and you're welcome here anytime.
Thank you. We are going to be talking about this Friday's Dateline, which is the 1996 disappearance and presumed murder of Kristin Smart. That'll be on Dateline this Friday, 9:00 Eastern and Pacific. And Courtney, I'm all yours.
There she is, Kristin Smart.
Yes, Kristin Smart. So I thought we would chat about the case a little bit and then talk about the additional coverage that'll happen on Dateline this Friday because the suspect was found guilty in October of this year. Well, no. Sorry. Was that August of this year? Yeah, last year.
Last year, yeah.
And he was found guilty.
Found guilty last fall and sentenced very recently, like within the last couple of weeks.
Let me just ask a question here because this is why I'm here, is to interrupt.
That's why you're everywhere, as I remember.
That's where I am everywhere, yeah. But I interrupt with critical questions that will be answered once, and I won't have to answer this
which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
The question is, once he's found guilty in this case, do we still need to call him the suspect, or is he now the killer?
No, now he's no longer a suspect. That is correct. Very good, Mark.
Thank you. No ding for that, please? Oh, thank you very much. All right, go ahead, Courtney.
All right,
please.
Courtney,
anyway, so he was found guilty last year.
Yes, she was found guilty last year, and so the sentencing recently happened, and so we'll be chatting about this murder today, and that is the subject of Dateline's episode on Friday.
It's a pretty high-profile situation, Kristin Smart.
Yes.
Josh, just from a standpoint of your show, do you try to stay away from stuff like that, or do you actually go toward those higher profile cases?
This actually is not what I would consider to be an ideal case because it received a lot of coverage. I always like it when we're sort of the only ones telling the story nationally, but that certainly isn't the case here. Been in newspapers and television all over the place. Even local television was sort of, following it incrementally over the years. And, I like it better when people don't know how it comes out. In this case, a lot of the audience, and certainly the true crime audience, knows a lot about this, which is why we had to sort of go deeper here. And we're going to be telling a story about this case that sort of hasn't been told before.
Well, please proceed.
Yes. So I'll briefly talk about the case. For those watching, this is Kristin Smart. She is 19. She was a freshman at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And she's, not that this matters, but she's stunning. She's 6'1". She's incredibly tall for a woman. And that was interesting only in that the murderer, former suspect, Paul Flores, was 5'10". But this is a picture of Kristin. I believe this was her senior picture. And I chose this picture actually because she's wearing a necklace that becomes important later in the case. So Kristin's 19. She's at Cal Poly. She's struggling a little bit with school and staying at Cal Poly. She's not sure she wants to stay there, but her family is encouraging her to be there. In fact, they're encouraging her to stay because it's safe, somewhat close to home. And she goes missing on the night of May 24th, but in the morning of May 25th. So she's last seen at 2 a.m. walking with a student, Paul Flores. And she had gone out that night. If you go down a little bit, Albert, just up to Margarita Campos. She had gone out with a friend, Margarita Campos, who was in the same dorm as her. But Margarita had left a little bit early in the evening because she was tired and didn't want to stay out. And so she left Kristin to go out by herself. And Kristin was said to have been at a party, maybe a little bit inebriated. Some people.
This was Memorial Day weekend of 1996, and it was an off-campus party. But this was all, these were all areas that felt completely safe to walk around, and this is something that students had done before. I just don't want to make it sound like Margarita abandoned her, because I mean, she was going back to her dorm, and Kristin was like, no, I want to go find one more party. They'd been at one party and they didn't like it, and Kristin was looking for one more. And, there was nothing to do that weekend. They'd stayed on campus while a lot of other people went home or went to other places. Anyway, that's all. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so Kristin's reported to have been at this party. She had maybe had a couple of drinks. It's actually thought that she might have been drugged at the party by the murderer, Paul Flores. But at the time he was the suspect, but she was inebriated and some students were helping her walk home. And then Paul Flores sort of approached them and offered to help get Kristin home to her dorm. Mm-hmm.
So he kind of said, I'll take it from here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there was some hesitation in having her walk home with Paul. But ultimately the students were reassured when Paul said, yes, I will definitely get her back to her dorm.
He lived in the building right across from hers.
I see.
Yeah, if you go down a little bit, Albert, it'll show the pathway between the two dormitories. And then, so this is, if you're watching, this is where Kristin and Margarita left one another. And then these are the two dormitories. So they were right next to each other.
Yeah.
And so Kristin goes missing.
Josh, it's funny. Courtney always comes very well. She just works very hard on this segment, and she really does. It's almost it's almost embarrassing.
Mark, someone's got to work on the show.
No, it's incredible. I think she does work harder than certainly she works harder than Albert and myself. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, she goes missing, and it takes like 2 days, right? For her to get reported, to be reported missing.
Her roommates kind of sound the alarm. The other women who live on her floor, but campus police they're definitely seem to be sort of dragging their feet. They don't take an official missing persons report until I think 3 days later, and they're still all the way through. They're kind of the mindset that she probably just went somewhere. She probably just made some last minute decision to go home or go off with somebody, some friend, or she met some guy, or we don't know. But she's probably just, and that's despite the fact that all her stuff is on her bed in her dorm room, stuff that she would take if she were running off for an unexplained, unplanned trip with somebody else, like her wallet and her backpack and her makeup and her keys. And I mean, stuff you would not leave there. And the fact that all that stuff is there does not seem to jog campus police into high gear. They for days sort of insist that there's nothing going wrong, nothing wrong, nothing to worry about. They're quoted in the campus newspaper as saying, there's no evidence a crime has been committed here. She doesn't seem to be the victim of a crime. We're pursuing this, but doesn't look like anything's wrong.
Well, where are the parents in all of this? Are they trying to get an investigation or trying to reach the cops or what?
The parents, first of all, the parents didn't realize that she was gone for a while. Kristin had left them a phone machine message, I think that Friday of Memorial Day weekend, and then she normally called home on Sunday, and she didn't call, and then I think on Monday they get a call from campus police saying, is Kristin there? Because we can't find her. And so the next morning, that was either Sunday or Monday, but then the next morning, Stan Smart gets in his car and drives the 4+ hours from Stockton, where they lived, to San Luis Obispo to start looking for his daughter, which he was a lot quicker to move than campus police were.
Okay, so that's the state
That's
of the
how it
state.
all. They were very campus police were very
slow on it.
very slow out of the blocks here, and that is not a that's not just me. That's a widely held feeling among law enforcement over the years.
Go ahead, Courtney, please.
Yes, yes. So, police interview students around the dormitories, friends of Kristin. They interview Paul Flores, two of Paul Flores's friends. I don't think Paul Flores had many friends. If you go down a little bit, Albert, I think there's a picture of Paul Flores. He was actually arrested. What was it? The following Monday, Josh, for the DUI, or he was taken into custody for missing something around a DUI that he had.
Yeah, but he was not arrested for this murder for 25, almost exactly 25 years. You know, it very quickly emerged that he was one of the last, if not the last person to be seen with Kristin. And when he comes in and sits down with police, he's got a black eye. And he says to them he got it playing basketball. The next time police sit down with him, which is, some period of days later, they've done a little checking and they found out that one of Paul Flores's friends say, no, he had that black eye earlier that weekend. He didn't get the black eye from basketball. He already had it. And so then Paul Flores tells a different story. He says he was working on his truck and he was lying down trying to get the stereo out of his truck and, somehow bumped his head or the stereo fell and hit him. I mean, he's got some story about how that happened. So now right away, he's told two different stories about how he got this black eye. And he was last seen in the company of a woman who was physically larger than he was. So the thinking among some people is that she hit him while he was assaulting her. Now, there's another little part of Paul Flores, which is not get talked about very much, which is on campus and in high school, he had a bunch of nicknames, none of them the kind that you want. He was known as Chester the Molester. He was known as Weird Paul or Creepy Paul. He made women uncomfortable, and a small amount of police work revealed that he made some people frightened women. Some of that was known to the university before Kristin disappeared. So there are going to be some questions as to how much they knew, what they did about it, whether they did anything about it. They don't appear to have done anything about it. And also what could be done about it. I mean, he hadn't exactly committed a crime, but he'd, shown up outside women's dorm rooms and behaved strangely and behaved in ways that made some women uncomfortable to the point of being frightened. There's also some reason to believe, and this is one of the things we're going to talk about on Dateline this week, that party was not the first time Paul Flores saw Kristin Smart. Other students will talk about how they'd met each other before, or at least he'd seen her before, and sort of attempted to ingratiate himself to her, and she was not terribly interested. So all of a sudden, that meeting at the party and his decision to walk her home sort of looks a little bit different. And one more thing, which Courtney pointed out, which was, she was seen almost incapacitated in the front yard of the home where the party was. She was lying down in the grass, seemingly unable to stand up, which was certainly consistent with having had a lot to drink. And, there were a lot of people that weekend having a lot to drink. It was Memorial Day weekend. But the thing about Kristin is that no one really saw her drink very much that evening. However, she was in Paul Flores's company to the extent that he was at the party, and he would have had access to whatever she was drinking. And date rape drugs, in 1996, that was a thing. They were sort of in their infancy, but it was definitely that was definitely a possibility. I mention that because years later, prosecutors said that they believed that Paul Flores had a history of drugging, raping, assaulting women. And,
that's interesting. I also would say, but because you both have kind of pointed to the physical size, you'd think that she would have had to have been significantly compromised for him to been able to.
Look, it may have been that she was drunk, but no one really saw her drinking. if she really was anesthetized by him, that would have made it harder for her to punch him. But on the other hand, he may have been getting the dosage, right then. This would have been early in his drugging career, if prosecutors are to be believed. So maybe that totally is possible, and it does fit with the profile that law enforcement assembled of him, of Paul Flores, as the years went by. Look, here's the interesting thing about this story. This is why I say we're going to sort of show you something a little bit different than the normal Dateline, in which you don't know who it was, because from the beginning there really weren't any other suspects. Paul Flores was the last person to see Kristin alive. He had this reputation, and he lied about how he got that black eye. All of that, and he very quickly did not want to cooperate with police. All of that sort of pointed to him as the main person of interest in this for a number of years. But campus police, one of the stories we're going to be telling is the incredible number of sort of missteps and fumbles by law enforcement early on. It took them a while to realize that Kristin was missing. It took them a while to treat this seriously. They early on asked a lot of questions about what she was wearing and what she drank. I mean, they went to her parents and sort of said, your daughter did a lot of things to put herself at risk. She was wearing, board shorts and, showing off her legs. And in an interview with Paul Flores, the cops described Kristin as massively promiscuous. Now, you can chalk that up to cops trying to build a bridge to this guy who they think attacked her. That's not inconceivable that would happen in the room like that. But there's no reason for talking about her like that to Kristin's friends or to her parents, because there you're not trying to build a bridge. That then comes across as what your actual opinion is. And that's a very, very ominous thing if that's what campus police were thinking, which is that sort of she brought this on herself. Whatever this was, she did this. I know that alarmed the Smart family almost from the get-go, and that's one of the things that sort of made them feel that they had to take matters into their own hands, which they did for about a quarter century. So part of it is this fumbling at the beginning. They didn't really search his dorm room. They didn't confiscate anything that could be tested for DNA, for blood evidence, for any trace that Kristin had ever been there. By the time they did search the dorm room, the term had ended. All the students moved out. Paul Flores' dorm room had been thoroughly cleaned the way all dorm rooms were at the end of the term. So that was like a big problem. And in that sense, if Paul Flores was the guy, he was incredibly lucky in that respect. Sometime later, cops decided to come back with cadaver dogs. And they went through that hall that you saw, that dorm. And there are like 115 rooms there, student rooms, something like that. All 4 cadaver dogs separately alerted on human decomposition in the same place, which was the now vacant room of Paul Flores.
Wow.
That said,
and that's admissible as okay.
Well, it's admissible, but it was viewed
contestable too. Yeah,
it was viewed right, and it was viewed at the time as not enough to go ahead with an arrest, and so he wasn't arrested, and he stopped cooperating, and like nothing happened for a really long time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, decades went by, right?
Yeah, I mean, 25 years, a good 25 years. So, I mean, part of this story is the sort of twisting, turning road that law enforcement took to finally find this guy, put a case together, and lock him up. Another one are all the sort of missteps and mistakes that were made early.
Let me ask, this is an interesting question that Lori asked in the chat. I think campus police maybe try to limit campus liability. Did they bring in municipal or federal cops? What was the involvement of law enforcement?
First, they asked for help from the DA's, from the San Luis Obispo DA's office investigators, and they sat down with Paul Flores, and they were considerably better, those 2 guys, one of whom we interview on Dateline this week, about, I mean, they're the ones who kind of exposed some of the early flaws in Paul Flores's story. But then pretty soon he stopped talking to them. But after about 30 days, which is an eternity in a missing persons case or a homicide investigation, they sort of officially handed it over to the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office, at which point the trail was extremely cold. One of the things that happened in this case many, many years ago, this was back during the administration of California Governor Pete Wilson, is the Smart family helped pass something called the Kristin Smart Safety Act, which requires that public institutions have a plan to coordinate with local law enforcement when there's a crime that's sort of outside their normal purview, which is a great idea. And the Smarts now want that expanded to the nation as a whole, because one of the things that we see on Dateline all the time, one of the things a lot of people know is that campus police are more set up for things like finding stolen computers and bicycles and burglaries and people who shouldn't be on campus and things like that. They don't really excel at complicated criminal investigations, and those need to be handed off to a real law enforcement entity right away. And in this case, it wasn't, and that's one of the reasons why this wasn't solved for such a long time.
That's interesting. By the way, purview, I will ding. Go ahead, Courtney, to finish up because we're almost out of time, please.
Yeah, I'll just mention that in 2019 there was a podcast called Your Own Backyard that started to air. A gentleman named Chris Lambert, who I know is on the Dateline episode this Friday. He put together this podcast. He was very young. He was 8 when this crime happened, and he was not in the field at the time, but he drove past the billboard that the family put up so many times, and he always wondered what that was about. And the interesting thing about Chris is he's not a journalist. He wasn't a friend of the Smart family. He'd never investigated any crime, but he sort of put together this podcast based on his own interest, and people started responding to it. A couple of things happened. One is it energized the investigation because the sheriff's office listened to it, and then they sort of, normally like a law enforcement agency is not anxious to get any help from podcasters. I can't think of any other time where that's been a thing, but here they were, and people were calling Chris Lambert with information, people who hadn't spoken with authorities, and he was getting that information to investigators. And so there was sort of this like unofficial partnership, which really ended up helping spur this investigation forward. One of the things we'll talk about on Dateline is sort of the mechanics of how that happened. So Chris Lambert deserves a lot of credit for sort of getting this thing started again and getting people interested in it again. And the podcast is very good. And partly that's because of the way that he tells the story, which is in a very unhurried, calm, and unbiased way, sort of giving Paul Flores and his family the benefit of the doubt in a lot of cases. Which
here's Paul Flores being arrested.
Being arrested, yeah. Paul Flores, 45 now, same age Kristin would have been.
Wow.
Just one more thing, which is, one of the things that this story is about is the question of what would you do for your kids? The Smart family spent 25 years trying to find justice for their daughter and trying to find out where she is and trying to prosecute the man that they thought was responsible. And the Flores family, if you believe prosecutors and the Smart family, spent 25 years trying to protect Paul Flores and shield him from prosecution. So there's because there was a belief from early on that Paul Flores could not have disposed of Kristin's body without some help, and they believed that came from his family. So you have the Smart family, which for 25 years didn't have any answers and had to live this life in which this was a constant presence. I mean, they weren't allowed to begin healing because the story wasn't over. The Smart family has not spoken with reporters in a very long time, but they did speak with us, and they'll be on Dateline this Friday.
Wow. Sounds like it's going to be quite the Dateline with some new soil tilled, is what I would say. Courtney, thank you. You brought a lot of visuals. I feel like we didn't necessarily, saw a bunch of them.
We went through most of them, and Chris Lambert's actually the next visual, I think. But no, we went through most of them, and then
good.
The trial actually started in July of last year, and then the verdicts were read in October. So Paul was found guilty of murder of Kristin Smart, and then his father, though, was found not guilty of.
Yes,
being
they
an
tried
accomplice.
his father for hiding her body because they found what the prosecution said was human blood buried under the deck of his home, indicating that a body had been essentially stored there for a long time. But the blood was too degraded to get a DNA profile. So all the tests could show was that it was human blood. That was not enough for the jury. They found Paul's father, Ruben Flores, not guilty of helping his son by hiding the body.
There they are, Paul Flores and Ruben Flores.
There they are. Paul Flores is going to be locked up for a very long time. And the one last thing is, one of the things we're going to talk about is the cost of justice being denied, not just to the Flores family. I'm sorry, not just to the Smart family, but to the issue of what Paul Flores was doing for 25 years, because prosecutors believe that what he did with Kristin Smart was drugged her and assaulted her, and that he only sort of refined that behavior over the years and did that numerous times. When they served search warrants on his house in San Pedro in Los Angeles, where he moved after Kristin disappeared, they found videos of him having sex with women who were clearly not in any condition to give consent. And they found drugs in his house that would have functioned as date rape drugs. And the belief by prosecutors, although he wasn't charged with this, is that Paul Flores, after Kristin Smart disappeared, spent the next 25 years drugging, raping, and assaulting women.
Jeez.
And that's because that's what happens when an investigation is fumbled early on and someone is essentially given a free pass. That's how he used his free pass, is what prosecutors say.
It's all very disturbing. So it's Dateline this Friday at what time?
9 o'clock Eastern and the Pacific, 8 o'clock Central.
Courtney, you and your friend did a nice job today. Thank you very much.
Me and the professional. Thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
A lot of fun.
Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
Oh, yes.
On the Mark Thompson
Gives me
Show.
chills. Josh Mankiewicz, great to have you a part of things always. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.
Anytime, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, good times, everyone. Good times. Courtney, same for you. I didn't mean to neglect. Nice job with you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the throwaway.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.